Hello and welcome to the very first Haunted Book Club, live on Substack, 9 p.m. every other Tuesday. And this is the first of what we hope will be a few of the book clubs. And like all book clubs, it's going to be a beautiful, chaotic mess. But unlike most book clubs, we'll do the reading for you. First of all, let's introduce ourselves. Who are you?
I'm John Reppion, and I'm an author or a writer of things. And I'm also a big fan of ghost stories and supernatural things, and I know some things about those things.
You do know lots of things about those things, and those things that you know are very interesting. My name's Gav Cross, and I'm a storyteller. And sometimes when I tell people that, they say, really? Yes, it is a job. I go around telling stories, and I too love ghost stories, and I've been reading them online since the end of lockdown. I've got loads of them out there, and I've still not got any better. Now, we also have a live chat, so you can say hello if you wish. And if you say hello in the chat, I will say hello back to you before we start. This is what we're going to do right now. If you're not listening or joining in live, you need to have knowledge of The Signalman by Charles Dickens. This is not a spoilery-based thing because it is 180 years oldish. But if you want the full Haunted Book Club effect, pause now. Go and take that dusty book off the shelf. Have a read. Go online. Or in this feed, the one beforehand, I will read it to you. So right now, off you go to listen to The Signalman by Charles Dickens, because that's what we're going to talk about. John, why are we talking about The Signalman by Charles Dickens?
Why indeed? Well, I think that the reason that I chose this for the first story for us to do is because I think it's one that a lot of people are familiar with or think they're familiar with. It's a story that we at least we all know by name, but I think that a lot of us possibly haven't thought about it that in depth, haven't really necessarily scrutinized the story. So I just thought it'd be a good one to dig into, really.
I agree with you, and for lots of different reasons. Now, I was talking to somebody in this parish who said to me, when they go to a book club, the first thing they do is they go around the circle and they say whether or not they liked the story. At the Haunted Book Club, there's no judgment here. You don't have to have liked the story or enjoyed it or even the reading. So I want to know, by typing into the chat, for those of you who are here, The Signalman by Charles Dickens, for you, is it woohoo or is it boohoo? Is it woohoo? What a great story. Type in woohoo if you loved it. If it's boohoo, it's not for you. Type that, or just, you can write, I liked it, or I don't like it. You're all grown-ups. You can do what you want. For you, John, I'm guessing, this is a big woohoo for you.
Yes, definitely a woohoo for me. I think it's a fantastic story.
Alan Nett say woohoo. They're big fans there. Bit long, but okay, says Barry. But okay.
Okay. That's the kind of enthusiasm we want in this book club.
Woohoo, says Chris Williams. Brackets, train whistle. And that's Chris showing off that they have actually read it. It makes me sad, but still like it. Hold on to that. I'd like to know why it makes you sad. Right. So what's going to happen is, John, you're going to talk to us because, John, I'm such a fan of your writing and I love getting to chat to you. I don't claim to know much, and I think you are humbly say the same, but you do know your stuff. John, you're going to tell us about The Signalman, put it into context, and then I really would like you in the chat to join in as well. Don't worry, we're full of chat if you don't want to. You can sit back and listen. But John, tell us about The Signalman.
Okay, so The Signalman, obviously we've all read or listened to it by now, but I will give you a quick rundown of what it is, which is, it's basically the story of a chance encounter between this wandering gentleman and this lone railway signal operator They strike up a friendship, and the signalman eventually confesses that he feels he's being haunted by this spectre, which is warning of disaster on the railway line. And really, the gentleman is trying to work out whether that is the case or whether there is something wrong with the signalman. That is the very basic version of what the signalman is. Um, so it's Charles Dickens, Victorian novelist, short story writer, journalist, um, social critic, campaigner for children's rights, Oliver Twist, Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations. But I mean, most impressive of all, A Muppet's Christmas Carol, which he wrote before Muppets had been invented. So
Amazing.
I don't think he gets enough credit for that,
Yeah.
really. But he only wrote about 20 ghost stories in his whole life, which I was surprised by. And apart from Muppet's Christmas Carol, which is obviously his most famous one, The Signalman is probably his best known. And that's probably due in no small part to the 1970s Ghost Story for Christmas adaptation by Lawrence Gordon Clark, which many of us know it from, and still terrifies a lot of people, the idea of that. So that, I think, that kind of is what brought it into the mainstream 20th century kind of ghost story circulation for a lot of people. But so it was originally written. So I don't know that much about Dickens, even though I've written a few different things about him over the years. But something I hadn't realised was he died at 58, so he died in 1870. And the Signalman's from 1866, so it's quite late on in his career, really. And it was published as part of Mugby Junction, which was this collection of railway-themed stories by Dickens and some other writers for the Christmas edition of All Year Round magazine. And Dickens used to do these special Christmas things every year. He's obviously very, connected with Christmas in everybody's minds, and the Christmas ghost story, of course. So it was published pretty late on, but it was influenced, or people say it was influenced by real life events for Dickens, which was in 1865. He and his mistress, the actress Ellen Ternan, were travelling from Felixstowe to London, and their train derailed. This was at Staplehurst in Kent. And because Dickens was travelling in first class, then his carriage stayed upright, but the ones at the back basically tipped over. And there were, I think, 10 people died, and there were a lot of injuries. So it was a bad, it was a rail disaster, really. And apparently Dickens was very scared of the railway from then on. Didn't really like travelling on the railway at all. But as much as that became an actual a news item, it was called the Staplehurst incident, or the Staplehurst rail crash. Then what was even better remembered was the Clayton Tunnel rail crash, which had happened in 1861, so not many years before. And this was this railway disaster that was basically caused by a signalman, an overworked, overtired signalman who made a mistake. Two trains collided in a tunnel, and 23 people were killed, more than 170 people were injured. And it was, at the time, the largest rail disaster that had ever happened. So obviously this would have been in Dickens's mind, in his mind, and then being involved in the accident himself. Though these are the two things that he's supposed to have drawn upon to write The Signalman. And something we have to, I think, we think about The Signalman as a kind of a traditional ghost story, and there's a couple of things that you need to actually factor in to think about it, to put it in context, where one of which is that the railway is not this really old fashioned or even well established thing at the time Dickens is writing this. The railway is really like 30 years old. The line that he had his accident on was only 20 years old. when it happens. So the railway is an ultra modern, bang up to date thing. And I think the other thing is this whole notion of being a signalman, of how the signalmen do their job, how they communicate, which is Morse code essentially, but a little bell rings in their hut and they follow instructions, they send messages back. It's Morse code. And that is the telegraph, these wires, they were only there because of the railway. The railway helped to spread that technology. So when you read the Signalman, when you listen to a reading of the Signalman, you're thinking of it as this antiquated thing. But what you have to realize is, in context, the railway is an incredibly modern thing. The method of communication is an incredibly modern thing. And the job that the Signalman is doing is about as high tech and stressful as it could possibly be. So it just puts it in a bit of a different context, I think, when you think about it in those terms. Um, so really, I think the Signalman is kind of this meeting of what we think of as quite a gothic ghost story and something that was very modern, up to date, and very real for Dickens himself. It was about his real life, his real experiences, and the real experiences of a lot of his readers. This would have been a lot more relatable than your classic kind of gothic ghost story.
So that's interesting. And again, I welcome comments as we go along in the chat. Yeah, framing it as it is a very modern setup, isn't it? Of course, because from our point of view, we're looking at, there's those original illustrations, the buttoned up a signalman's costume. You can imagine the hats, you can imagine the formality. But yeah, this is cutting edge transport. I didn't realise. Was it Folkestone? Did you say Felixstowe or Yes, I think it's Folkestone.
Folkestone, yeah.
Yeah, Folkestone, because he lived on that east coast, didn't he? Okay, and I didn't realise he was with his mistress.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, he was very well known at the time. So I think it was, an open secret. She was an actress as well. People knew both of them were. I don't think it was much of a, I don't think they needed to cover up the fact that they'd been on the train together, as far as I can gather. I think they'd just been on holiday together, actually. I think they'd come back from France.
Okay, so one of the things we want to try and do is kind of classify. We're kind of like taking a top trump approach to our ghost stories, and we got some different classifications. I'll whiz through them very quickly, and then be interesting to see what people think. So you've classified some, and I think they're pretty fair. There's the classic ghost story. There's the haunted house or place. There's the physical creature or the monster. There's the cursed or the haunted object. There's generally weird fiction. There's something demonic. There's something psychic or spiritualist. And then there's something that's not necessarily paranormal. We might have an unreliable narrator. So what I'd like you to be thinking about that as well. What do you think? How would you categorize it? John, why do you think it's scary? And in the chat as well, I'd really like to find out from you what it is that scared you, or maybe like Katie, created that sadness. Judith, I missed you there. You're a woohoo as well for this story. John, why is this remembered as a classic scary story?
So I think so there are a couple of things. First of all, I was saying about the modernity of it and how it's kind of talking about things which would have been very cutting edge at the time. There is some proper gothic in there, and when the narrator first travels down into the cutting, then Dickens does a proper little bit of gothic. If I've got the quote here, on either side, a dripping wet wall of jagged stone, excluding all view but a strip of sky. The perspective one way, only a crooked prolongation of this great dungeon. The shorter perspective in the other direction, terminating in a gloomy red light and the gloomier entrance to a black tunnel, in whose massive architecture there was a barbarous, depressing, and forbidding air. So little sunlight ever found its way to this spot that it had an earthy, deadly smell, and so much cold wind rushed through it that it struck chill to me as if I had left the natural world. So that's almost Poe, isn't it? But I think that's really interesting because it's about the place, it's about where this is taking place. And he has this real foreboding about entering that place. But I think, and I feel like this is me being a little bit obsessed with, this is sort of going into the minutiae of the writing of it a little bit, which hopefully I won't get obsessed with and do. But I think it's really, it only struck me in rereading it these couple of times that there's a funny thing going on. So the start of the story, the very first bit. So, hello below there. When he heard a voice thus calling to him, he was standing at the door of his box with a flag in his hand, furled round its short pole. One would have thought that, considering the nature of the ground, that he could not have doubted from what quarter the voice came, but instead of looking up to where I stood on the top of the steep cutting nearly over his head, he turned himself about and looked down the line. Now, that opening, hello below there, who says that? When he heard a voice thus calling to him, he was standing at the door of his box. So we're in omniscient narrator. That's how we think the story is going to pan out. Somebody calls something when he, our character, did this, but instead of looking up to where I stood, so we switch. So we go, oh, this is first person. It's not omniscient narrator. Now that's at the very, very start. But what goes on throughout all of the Signalman, which I think makes it work in a very modern and very clever way, is this constant questioning of who is being haunted and who is doing the haunting. Both men seem to think that the other one is a ghost when they first meet them. The narrator voices that he thinks the man is a spectre. The other man says, oh, I took you for somebody else. It's this ghost. They're both thinking that the other one is a ghost. So we as a reader are constantly going, well, who's telling this story? Who's the main character? Who's the ghost? Who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy? And we can do the spoilers because that's what we're here to talk about. Ultimately, our narrator is the man being haunted and not the signalman. Or, I mean, he's also the person doing the haunting. So there's this constant switching between those two things, which I think is really unsettling and really clever.
Okay, so this is why I want to pull people in that are here, that have read it, know it really well. First of all, some of the things John has said, if you want to ask John a question about it, you can do so. If you want to clarify something he said, if you want to extend it, if you want to throw in something new, or if you just want to tell us what you thought. First of all, I'd love to know what you thought about the story, what you liked about it, what scared you about it, where the tension came from. So now's your chance to throw in, and it'd be really good to have these conversations with you. I want to, while we're waiting for people to do that, and I hope you do it, and no one has to, but all good book clubs are conversations. I want to throw in a little spinner here, John. I think this is a masterpiece of tension and that description of going down. I can feel the temperature and the cold and the darkness. I don't think this is a ghost story.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're talking about our categories, which we will get into,
say again.
If we're talking about our categories, when we're getting into our categories, I think it's I wouldn't call it a classic ghost story, which is weird because to many people it is the classic ghost story, but I don't think it is it's not a straightforward ghost story, and there's nothing straightforward about it at all, which I think is part of its charm and its longevity and why it is so creepy, I think, because there's a lot to try and untangle, isn't there, in terms of, like I say, who's haunting who and why.
It is creepy all the way through. Katie says, I think the narrator, being a skeptic, caused the signalman to doubt his own precognition and ignore the man that called to warn him about the train. Yes, because this is where I think it leans to. It's, for me, this is a story that articulates with better wordage and superb use of England. more than I can. This is about precognition. This is a time slip story, not a ghost story. It's not that. It's not tense and quite scary. And as you say, they mistake each other for spectres. But yeah, there's an inevitability, an inexorable move towards. I'd be really interested in what people think if they approach this story for new. If this is the first time they read it or come across it, I'd like to know what your responses were towards the end of it. Not a ghost story for Christmas. They'll have to change the DVD cover. It's a workplace stress story. Yeah, I think there is a workplace stress there.
I think that's a really good point. And like I said, obviously this massive rail disaster that was actually caused by a signalman would have been in very much in Dickens's mind. But I think so. We've had a little chat about this before, and it's easy, I think, to think that the narrator is being a little bit patronizing about the signalman because basically he's saying surprisingly intelligent man, not an idiot,
Yeah.
not an idiot. You might think he was an idiot, but he wasn't an idiot. But I think knowing what we know about the real life crash, knowing what we know about Dickens's own involvement, I think what this is the narrator, I think, is just a Dickens stand-in. It's basically him showing the sympathy for the signalman and showing that it's not his fault. He's not, you think he's lazy, he's not lazy. You think he's an idiot, he's not an idiot. He's this man, and he's just ended up there by, more or less bad luck or some mistakes. And it could be you or I who was there, and he's doing the best job he could. There's nothing he could do. I think there's a very strong message of it isn't his fault when at no point do we think it is. It's because of the signalman that he causes this, and also that he could have prevented any of it, because, as he himself says, he can't take any action on any of these warnings. But I would say as well, I think only by going over the story a few times, I've realised, yes, you think on some level that if the gentleman hadn't turned up, the signalman would have been okay. But I don't think that's true, because he's already got the hello below there's.
Wait a minute.
No.
A minute.
He's already got the hello below there's coming in before the man turns up.
I've not thought about this. So the visitor could be the reason. Oh, that has blown my head, John. That has blown my head. Who agrees or disagrees? So that has added a layer. Chris says, so you think it's more sapphire and steel? Oh, that's a good reference. That must mean you're very old, Chris.
It's before my time, Chris.
Weird fiction. Yeah, I think it is. It's a health and safety nightmare, says Barry. Yeah, I think maybe
it is.
Instead, maybe Dickens wrote it as one of those kind of government information things. Katie is coming in here. The signalman feels the weight of his responsibilities, which I think is evident. And then I'm going to skip to her next comment, which is, I think the narrator caused his death. I think he did too.
No, I don't think he did, because he's already heard the voice saying hello below there before he turns up. And then it's the hello below there that kills him when the train driver's coming along. So even if the man had never turned up, he would have still had the hello below there to distract him.
But it's a precognition story. If you take it as a precognition story, it's not, what do they call it in time? Like Star Trek timey-wimey stuff. It's like the hello below there it's in the loop. It's in the loop.
It's in the loop. Well, this is the thing about the telegraph and the. So I think that I was sort of toying with the idea that it's actually some kind of techno horror almost, because when the actual real life disaster happened, it happened because of miscommunication, and there's the whole thing of the bell ringing a different way by the Spectre, but the signalman being attuned to that and doing everything he can and I think because the telegraph is such a modern thing at the time, I almost think there could be something, and there's a lot of mention of the wires themselves that carry the signals and the wind humming through them, and that is kind
And
of
the title, it's very self, the Signalman. It would be a newish, you know, ish. I mean, it would have been around for a good few decades. Okay, as we
yeah,
continue our chat, I'd like to know in the room what bits, when you were engaging with the story, what bits got to you? What bits made you tense? What bits scared you? What was the element? What was your favorite? If you've got the text in front of you, what's your favorite quote? I can't remember for sure, says Chris, but in the TV version, the narrator is present at the final accident. So it feels more like he could have caused it than the book. I, I, I have seen it, but so long ago I don't remember it. But I think that makes sense. He hears it for two other accidents, and the third time he hears it, it is the narrator. Then the fourth is the man that he ignores. Yeah, it is a theme going around. It is echoing around. I was a bit stuck with in my head. Sometimes the engine was on the front of the train, and sometimes the engine was at the back of the train. Particularly the one that got me, the sad one that got me, was the death of the woman,
yeah.
and how he could have seen that. Because I suppose I'm thinking about high speed trains, but maybe these trains are not so high speed as I'm imagining.
No, I don't think so. But I think that they've got a terrible stopping distance, haven't they? So, but I found a thing where I actually listened to a little podcast that was speaking to one of the very last signalmen who was still working on English trains, and this was only from like 2019, and he was doing exactly the same job as the signalman in the story, still communicating in exactly the same way, and even he was very conscious of his responsibility, like how alert he had to stay, and the fact that basically one miscommunication could cause a train to be on the tracks as another train crossed, which I thought was amazing that, they've only literally in the last kind of 8 years or something automated it out completely.
I saw, perhaps because of the references, I saw a video of a contemporary Indian railway system, which of course, for reasons we can't get into in this, was built very much on the British model, where they still have the system that you see in heritage rail, which is a hook and a token, that the token has to be collected from the platform to the driver to enable the train to go ahead on a single track. And
Yeah,
that's
they
a
do the thing
system.
where they hold their arm out and hook the thing over and all of that. Yeah, I mean, saying about how modern some of this technology was at the time of Dickens, and saying about the signalman still existing until quite recently. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, that I hadn't realized myself until one of my kids very briefly got into trains, is that there are still steam trains running at major stations all around the country. The website that you go on is Rail Advent if you want to have a look where they are. But we live in Liverpool, so they stop at Lime Street Station just every so often, just a steam train pulls in. And my mind was so blown by that. It's like, finding out that if you wait at the bus stop long enough, a horse-drawn omnibus pulls up. But there are still steam trains just going about on the main line in the UK. So that's a strange, that's almost, it was definitely felt kind of ghostly to me when I first saw it. The idea of these big behemoths still just pulling into the normal station.
Katie again mentioned something that I thought about a lot when I was reading it: the loneliness of the role of the signalman, the
Yeah.
fact that he's in this sepulchral gloom, and that quote that you gave, the darkness, how the sun and the cold and the damp and the cutting the stone sides. He's spending hours and hours there alone. And yes, there's communication up and down the line, but it's just work based.
There's even the bit where the visitor says to him, "Can't you go up into the sun if it's a sunny day?" And he says, "Well, I can, but I'll always have to be listening out for the bell. So again, that's the responsibility, isn't it? Him constantly being drawn back to this unpleasant place. That's his lot. That's his curse, almost, isn't it? To be the keeper of this dangerous kind of dungeon sort of thing.
So Jeanette's telling us that in Helsby, which is on the Wirral in Merseyside, there is still a signal box. Railway restoration for historic Grade 2 listed. There is a signal box still. Is it personed? Is it manned? Is it still literally in operation? That would be incredible, because that's a Merseyrail line, isn't it? Dean, the information zipping up the lines must still have felt technologically mind-blowing, information travelling so instantaneously. What if that information travels so fast it gets there faster than it was sent? Like the warnings the Signalman gets from the Spectre. This is it, Dean. This is it for me.
That is
This is
it,
the
yeah,
blend.
exactly.
That's the framework. You've articulated that so much better than I could. That this is a technological precognition horror. This is like getting an email from yourself from 2 days ahead of time saying, wasn't that terrible? What was terrible? That thing that just happened. What just happened when the woman died? What, where, when, how? And not enough information to prevent, because he talks about that, doesn't
Yeah,
he? Not
he
enough
does, yeah.
information.
Not enough information. He can't send messages up or down the line saying there's danger, because he doesn't know what the danger is. And I think that actually that cuts to what is the absolute horror that comes out from the whole thing, is the idea of getting messages, getting warnings, knowing that something terrible is going to happen, and not being able to do anything about it, being powerless to stop it. And I think that's the real horror of the entire story, is that it's through no fault of anyone's own. They're kind of, we know there's something wrong, we know there's something bad coming. There's no way we can stop it. There's nothing we can do about it.
There's not quite enough information. And then, of course, there's that horrific ending where his body is still on the line. That
Yeah,
revelation of the repeating of the lines that we keep hearing. And of course, there's the physicality, the left hand up, and because of course we find out that I mean, that's an odd thing, unless it's the driver knew what was coming next. He didn't want to watch it.
he didn't want to see. Yeah,
Didn't want to
and
see
there's
it.
the whole thing of for God's sake, clear the way, and that's the thing that prickles the hairs on the back of the narrator's neck, because he says, he spoke those words out loud, but those are the words that I had ascribed to that gesture in my own head. So they'd never been spoken aloud. Which again is like, that makes it feel like it's him that's being haunted more than the signalman being haunted. But yeah, I think that's a brilliant moment. And like I say, it's just that thing where it keeps switching of who's the person being haunted, who's telling whose story, who's the kind of, not the victim, but who's this happening to exactly. And it's switching perspectives right up until that final moment, isn't it?
Okay, so I'd really be interested in your comments and thoughts before we kind of like start to. I want to introduce how we might categorize these stories. No better metaphor for the unchangeable destiny than the train line. You're right, because it's from one place to another. It is a straight line. It is inexorable, and only a tragedy will stop us, or leaves. The wrong kind of leaves on the line. The wrong. There is. It is a very strong and powerful metaphor, but I think this conversation has helped me reframe it, because it's what we were talking about earlier about context, but I hadn't put the technological element on it. But I didn't. As I say, I didn't feel like it was a ghost story to me. Is PTSD playing a part, asks Chris, or guilt that he could have done something? Going back to it, I felt that he is grasping for certainties with his studies into equations and formulas. That's the signalman, that he's
Yeah,
striving to better himself. And then Josie asks, why was he in the tunnel? I can imagine he probably had some duties.
There's a bit earlier on where when the Spectre first appears and disappears, he follows it into the tunnel, but he can't find it. So I think you have to assume that the same thing has happened again.
So was the Spectre him? Did he see himself coming in and out of the tunnel at work?
It's weird, isn't it? Because when he sees the Spectre waving its arm clear the way, it's just standing there, and that is actually it's mimicking what the driver does. So yeah, who is the Spectre? That's the interesting thing. The Spectre doesn't seem to be a person. It doesn't seem to be a version of anybody. It just seems to be um, a communication, doesn't it? It seems it's taking on a person's form to try and communicate this information. So I think again, that's why it's possibly not a ghost story, because it's not the ghost of anybody. It's actually playing multiple roles. It's showing different things happening.
So Chris says that the mask on the TV version does look a bit like him, which
Yeah, yeah,
kind of buys into it. And Josie's saying that he was anxious and trying to check for danger and cause the danger to himself. Yeah, I think that's probably it. It becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah,
It becomes,
absolutely. Yeah.
but then again, the time is inexorable. A line that always seemed to pop up in Bernard Cornwell novels when I read them. Time is inexorable. That no matter what, he can't avoid this. No matter how much the narrator feels the regret. I'm going to throw something in the mix here. Please disagree with me if you do. I don't like the narrator.
You
I'm
don't think he's
suspicious.
a
I'm suspicious of the narrator. Something was in their past. It was intimated and hinted at. Something caused him to go exploring the world after a closeted life. I think the
yeah? He says,
narrator.
I'm now free of such things or such constraints. Yeah, there's nothing to say exactly why he's wandering about just talking to anybody he feels like talking to.
I
I
think
don't
he's
think that makes him
deaf.
a bad man. You think
I don't
he's
think he's a
deaf?
bad man. I don't like him. I think where he goes, death bestrides the fields. I don't know where that's come from. Um, I think he sees everything in the future, but badly transmitted. Yeah, it's like a, untuned. It's not quite tuned in. Then the message is not quite getting through. Maybe getting messages that quickly felt a bit like getting messages from the future. I mean, it must have been weird. It must have been
Yeah,
weird. It's normal to us now. Yeah. Could he be back? Could he back from the war? Could he be back from the war? Who? The narrator or the signalman?
the narrator could, I suppose. Yeah, but I don't know what war that would be. What war would that be? He says.
There is a
He
sense.
says.
Sorry,
Go on. Sorry.
The narrator says, Chris, there is a sense, a purgatorial sense. Claire says a sense of purgatory about the story. Yeah, I do think it is. There's something about going down into those dark, damp, in the stonework bowels of the earth. Carving through, cutting out this hole into these darker worlds, which we're then going to, literally run rail shot over. What do we release? There's a little bit, it's not a phrase I like using for lots of reasons. Lovecraftian about that kind of, you go to the edge of the beneath to find what was before, and once you release it, you're stiffed.
Yeah, I think also there's a yeah, the purgatorial feeling of it. There is a feel. Obviously there's kind of a time loop kind of thing going on, and I think you do come away at the end of the story wondering whether it is going to happen again in some form. Like, I know he does interact with the men on the railway, and he does all the not the man that I know. Let's have a look at him.
Yeah,
He does all of that, but there is some sort of there's a weird creeping feeling that he might be back the next day to shout hello below there, isn't there? Kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. There's a savior complex about the narrator as well, isn't there? Because I'm going to take you to a doctor and get you sorted. At first, I was thinking Signalman was going to be like the ferryman. Then it seemed like he was tortured himself. Yeah, I can see that. that he's on the precipice, the thin part of the veil, but actually the veil is thinning around him. It's getting closer until the inevitability of his death.
It's worth saying that Dickens he was a member of the Ghost Club, so he did believe in the supernatural, and I think especially towards the end of his life, he was more interested in it. And the Ghost Club, which was formed at Trinity College, Cambridge, they did like debunk some spiritualist stuff, and they were interested in seeking the truth of kind of paranormal phenomena, but obviously they were believers as well. And after
Were they believers?
I think some of them were believers. I think it wasn't just skeptics. Well, it went on for, so Conan Doyle was a member after Dickens's death. Algernon Blackwood, Robert Aikman, Dennis Wheatley, Harry Price, who investigated Borley Rectory, Peter Underwood, who wrote the Gazetteer of British Ghosts and all of those books.
Right.
Peter Cushing was a member of the Ghost Club. The most successful hunter of all, because he killed Dracula, of course.
Yeah, he did.
So
he was a proper Dracula killer.
He was. So I think that he did have the legitimate interest in that side of things as well.
Okay, so to start to wrap things up, and again, any comments, thoughts, questions, challenges, now's the time to pop them in. I would like to categorize this a little bit. Okay. New technology amongst ghost hunters. Yeah. Do they get ghosted at the Ghost Club? Says Barry. He's been working on that one. Yeah. Look, I'm team skeptic, but I love a ghost story. But I want to start thinking about these. I want to know what you really think about these stories. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to mark these out of 5. Okay. So first of all, how scary? How scary? There's a link there from Barry. Thank you. Was this for you as a reader, listener, watcher? Out of 5, how scary? So could you type scare factor and your number out of 5? John, how scary did you find it? And I know that's a bit of an abstract concept, but John's disappeared. He's disappeared like a ghost. I can't see him. So it's just us for now. How scary out of 5 was this story for you? Could you scare factor 4? I like that. Scare factor 4. I'm just going to re-invite John as a co-host. 4 says 2. So Barry wasn't scared. 2 says Josie. 3 says Claire. 2 hello below indicates a purgatory. Not scary. Them glasses 5 points. He's back. He's back from purgatory. Purgatoria. Okay. Scare factor 3.
Techno horror, you see? Techno horror.
Techno horror. Right. Next question. Creep factor. By that, I mean, how long did the imagery of this last with you? How long did you think about this story? Some stories you read, it's like, oh, that was good. And you put it down, it's gone. But what's the creep factor for you? For me, this one has got a low scare factor. I think a scare factor 2, but high creep factor. He's back with more pixels. Yeah, you are clearer.
That was what I was doing. I was off getting some pixels.
Yeah.
I think this is maximum creep factor, I think, because I think the more you think about it, the more creepy it is.
I think it lives with me. I've read it a good while ago, and it lives with me. So I think this is a scare factor 2, a creep factor 4 for me. I think about it a lot. So I want to know what you think. What's the creep factor? And then the last category, because maybe we'll produce the top trumps in the end. How satisfied were you with the story? The satisfaction of this, was it like a it doesn't have to be scary, but how good was it for you? So out of 5, what's your satisfaction level? Creep factor 3, but only since we talked about it. Oh, that's good. So it's gone up. It's gone up. See, I find
that is good.
I find this scare factor 2 for me, creep factor 3 because it lasts, but satisfaction level 4. I find it a really good. It's a story that just sticks with me. The images, pictures painted, they're very vivid. Creep factor 3, but
Definitely.
may increase once I continue to ponder. Creep factor 4, says Chris. Still going to be thinking about it after this. That's quite good. That's quite good. So we're getting quite up there. I'm going to think this is, 3.5 on average. A 3.5. Yeah, it's gone
I
up.
think that
Says Jeanette since the book club. Yeah. Satisfaction level 5. Dean has got scare factor 2, low scare. Creep factor 4, it's stayed there, and a satisfaction level 5. That's good. Yeah, the satisfactions are high, John.
this is good. I'm doing a good job for Charles Dickens.
You picked the right story to begin with. Right, we're going to start wrapping up the podcast part of this. Then we're going to have a very short section after this called the AfterLive. The AfterLive, which is for live listeners only. But John, what's our next story? 2 weeks' time from now.
So in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be talking about The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, which I think is, again, incredibly well known, but I think probably a lot of people know the story and haven't read it. So it's about a deadly plague called the Red Death that is sweeping through the land, and a lot of posh people decide to have a big party while that's happening, thinking that that's a good way to pass the time. And of course, the Red Death needs no invitation.
No spoilers.
It's written in 1842, so if you don't know what's happening in it, what are you playing at?
But as Josie said, first time reading, brackets listening today, but I'll read it again later.
Brilliant. Well, that's what we want. It's a book club.
It is a book club. So that's going to be in 2 weeks' time. Now, how this works, and you don't have to partake of it. On Monday, the 23rd, I will release on this feed a video or audio version of Mask of the Red Death, which I will read to you. I am really welcoming feedback on those. I'm learning. Okay. Class divide theme running on both of these. Completely agree with you, Dean. Class, I think, is
absolutely.
really big factor and element in these stories, which I think is connoted by the authors themselves. I really want to talk about that quite a lot, actually, as we go through. So on Monday, or on your feed, you'll get my reading. You don't have to listen to it. You can find your own. There's loads online. There's loads on YouTube. Or you can actually, of course, read it. And then the following week, Tuesday at 9 o'clock, on the 3rd of March, we'll be back here with the next Haunted Book Club for the Mask of the Red Death. Absolutely.
We will indeed.
Now, to point out, we picked the first few, and there's a link to, if you go to the Substack article, there's a link to all the stories that we're doing. We've picked those, but ultimately we want you to suggest and choose stories. And the way we'll do that is we will have conversations in the AfterLive. Sorry. We're going to bring this live section to a close, but there's some people here, and if you want to stick around, we can have a chat and we can start to talk about what stories we're going to do next. But John, we're not just doing it on Substack, are we? What else are we doing?
No, we are actually going to be appearing live in some incredible locations in the coming months. So in March, on March the 21st, we're going to be visiting Norton Priory, and you're going to be reading and performing The Curfew by Lucy M. Boston, and we're going to be discussing that. And Lucy M. Boston actually lived at Norton Priory before the house was demolished there, and the story is actually set there. and deals with some real things that happened there. So that's going to be very exciting. Then in May, on the 14th of May, we're going to be at the Historic Portico Library in Manchester, where we're going to be talking about Elizabeth Gaskell's The Old Nurse's Tale, which is a proper, look, it's a haunted manor. There's ghostly children, there's creepy music. It ticks all the boxes. So they're both going to be just incredible. I can't wait for them.
And to finish with a brilliant, Chris Williams, good steam train chat. Really been stoked to be here. Chris Williams, the award-nominated cartoonist of The Big Issue and Private Eye. And I will say this as someone who's admirer of their work, award-nominated for their cartoons and punnery. Thank you. That is a perfect chat. So we're going to draw that to a close. We're going to say thank you to those of you who are listening or watching this back. But if you want to stick around, if you're here live, the AfterLive and the answers to it are coming up after this. Thank you very much. All the subscriptions, all the likes, all the subscribes, and all the recommendations, they really do count. And if you want to engage with us, we're on Instagram. We've got a Facebook group. Have a chat with us and tell us what you think. If something pops into your head afterwards, come back and tell us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here on Substack, 9 p.m.
Thank you very much.
2 weeks. And stick around for the AfterLive. Other than that, have a good read. It is, of course, the year of reading. Enjoy yourselves. Don't sit in the dark and read alone, though. You won't be able to see the words. Good night.